Hey y'all, this is Christy from Teadoddles, and today I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit about how to keep your seams straight when you're first learning how to sew. Had someone ask me a question about this before and talking about it. They're new to sewing, and some tips and tricks on how to get your seams straight when you're new to sewing, because once you learn how to do it, it becomes a little bit like second nature. I'm not going to say I always get it straight every time as long as I've been sewing, but I do try. And I've got this, you're probably going to see my arm of my camera holder here. I've set this up as best I can. I'm going to try not to shake the camera too much. But we'll just go through some tips and tricks right quick. And but first I'd like to say welcome new subscribers and welcome back subscribers. I'm happy to have you here with me and my maker shenanigans. I do like to do the sewing things, the yarny things, and the DIY things. If you like to make things, you might like it here. All right, now one of my biggest tips is now this sewing machine I have is a Brother Strong and Tough sewing machine because I do a lot of sewing, and it just is a little more powerful than your standard machine. Everybody's machine is going to be a little bit different, so some of the things I'm going to show you may or may not be on your machine. If you have an older machine and you don't know what all the dials and the little buttons and things mean, I would try looking up the serial number or the type that's usually printed on the machine somewhere. And you may be able to find a sewing machine manual that someone's uploaded, and then you can figure out what all those buttons and things mean. So my very first tip for new sewists is if you have one of these buttons here, or this little dial, this controls the speed of the presser foot, or the speed of the machine in which it sews. So I have it set to high because I sew fast. But if you have a lead foot on your sewing machine like I do, let me get this set up. I'm going to show you the different speeds. So at this speed, it goes like this. It goes pretty fast. But if you go down to medium, it's going to slow it down no matter how hard you press the foot. And then it even has one even slower than that, which is really slow. Now that one right there I tend to only use if I'm sewing around a tricky corner, or if I'm going over something really thick and I don't want to go so fast that it makes a chance that it's going to break the needle. So that one right there, I don't recommend it unless you're doing something that you really need to slow down for. This one right here might be a good one for new sewists. It doesn't go as fast. And then you can kick it on up to high gear once you really get a handle on your machine. I don't think all machines have those. I prefer to have it on my machine because I can slow it down if I want to. Of course, I can adjust the speed normally with my foot. I've been doing it long enough. But that is my first tip for new sewists. If you have a speed adjustment on your machine, lower that speed, and then you can have better control over what you're sewing. And that will help keep your seam straight until you get used to what you're doing, and then you can kick it up a notch. So now I'm going to talk about these little marks on my plate of my machine. I'm going to zoom in right quick. Hopefully it doesn't make anybody seasick. I think I need to zoom in a little bit more. All right, there we go, right there. Let me get this to stop moving. Ooh, sorry about that. All right, so on my machine, mine has markings. Okay, I'll put this down. You probably can't see the numbers on it, but it has a 5/8 and stuff, and most of them are up by the they're on the plate up under the presser foot where the teeth for the presser foot comes up. For me, on my machine, the edge of my standard presser foot, and a presser foot is this little thing right here, in case you don't know what that is. That's called a presser foot. From the needle to the edge of my machine, of my presser foot, is 1/2 inch. Now, that's as if I have my needle set to the far right. I can adjust it to go to center, and that changes that dimension. So to the far right, usually it's the first setting on your machine. It's and some machines always sew from the middle. So what you can do is just take a little measuring tape and measure from the center of your from your needle to the edge of your presser foot, and you'll know how far that is. And that's a good one to help keep seams straight, to hold it along the edge of this presser foot. So it would look something like this. Hold on, let me get my pieces together. I could put it right here, because you don't usually have marks down here at the bottom. Mine does have a couple on this part of it, but not as many as it does up here. So, and you can sew, and you can watch the edge of this. And another thing, if you're new to sewing, some people tend to want to push this or pull on it. Don't do that. You just lay your fingers lightly on it to kind of guide it. You're not pushing it down. You're not pulling on it. You're letting the machine pull it up under, because that's what it's supposed to do. So you can do it just like that, and that will give you, depending on what seam allowance you're working with or whatever. So seam allowance is something that depends on what you're doing. So I would use 1/2 inch for some of my bags sewing. A lot of printed patterns you buy in the store for clothing has 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. The PDFs you buy online a lot of times have 1/2 inch. And when you're sewing a quilt, 1/4 inch is the standard. So these are quilt pieces, but I'm just demonstrating. So let's grab 2 more pieces, because I've got so what's good to know on your machine is where those marks are from, what the distance is from where your needle is. Okay, usually whatever the position it's in when you turn your machine on, that's the distance marked on your plate. Okay, whatever that distance is from where that needle is and over. So another trick, if you need to go further away from your presser foot, you can't use that as a guide for whatever reason, you can use, this is drafting tape, or you can use painter's tape, just a low tack tape, and you can take it and line it up with whichever one you want to, and just do it straight across your machine like that. That way you'll have an edge to line up to, even if you're you don't have one down at the bottom. You can do just like that, and you can use that as an edge. They also make magnetic and adhesive markers with an edge on it. You can buy, I'll link that down in the description. I'll find one online and link it down in the description, that you can attach to your machine so that you have an edge to butt up against when you're sewing, so you can help keep seams straight. That's another way you can do that. I have some specialty presser feet I'm going to show you that I use sometimes for different things, for edges. This one here, it has a little edge right here that sits, you can butt your fabric up against. So when I'm sewing, the edge of my fabric can go against this as it goes up under the presser foot. But I do have to set my machine to center to fit in this little hole here. But that is a 1/4 inch seam. So when I'm doing quilts, I really like to use this one, because I sew a bunch of pieces together at one time, and then I can just feed it through the machine, and this little edge helps me keep my seams straight. Now this one has an edge on it too, but it's in the center of it. This one I can use, this one you can use if you can go left or right or centered. That's why it has that little bend in the plate. I like to use this one like if I want to top stitch something. For instance, if I'm using, like I want to stay so far from this edge, that little lip will fit right down in the crease there as I'm sewing, and it'll maintain that distance for me. So this is something I like to use. If I put it all the way to the right, or the left, excuse me, if I put it all the way to the left, I can use it the same as I use the one for quilting. It's the same distance. But if I put it in the center, it's about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So I don't really use that for sewing seams. I use it when I want to top stitch something and maintain the distance between where I'm top stitching at, so it looks nicer. So this is a great one for that. And I'll put links. I actually bought a whole set of presser feet for my machine. Mine have the snap-on presser feet. Some of them have a shaft that the whole shaft comes out and they're attached to the feet. It depends on your type of machine. But I'll put a link to the presser feet. I ordered a whole set that has all kinds of different ones off of Amazon. So I'll put that down below. It has everything you need. One other thing you can use is a guide. This thing here. This one I use when I get really wide. This is usually when I'm quilting and I want to quilt so far from the edge, or so far I want to space my quilting stitches. There's a little hole back here behind my presser foot on this bar. I can just push this in and I can move it to the dimension that I want it to be in. And then this kind of gives me a guide further out. If you don't want to put tape on your machine or something, as I'm sewing, I can maintain that distance. And you can use it on this side, and you can turn it around and put it on the other side too. So it works both ways, depending on what you want to do. So that's another thing you can use. And I'll put a link down in the description for that. Most machines come with this, depending on what you get. A lot of them do come with this attachment, but that's what that's for. I don't know the technical term for it, but that's what it's for. It's so you can use it as a guide when you're stitching, usually when you're stitching on a quilt or something like that. All right, I'm going to back this back out. A little movement. There we go. All right. So those are my tips on how to maintain a straight seam. Slow it down at first. Make sure you know the distance from your needle to the edge of your presser foot and to other markings on your machine. Like they usually have a dimension on them. You can use painter's tape or drafting tape. You can also use special presser feet to maintain seams, depending on what you want to do. Now, my other tip for doing seams is if you are sewing clothing, or sometimes bags, depending on what you're doing, you want to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Like when I get to, if this was a bag or something, I would back stitch in the beginning and the end when I cross over. And that keeps it from coming apart too easy when you do. That has a back stitch on, this don't. So what can happen is you handle your fabric, some stitches can come out and it'll come apart. And then you'll sew it to another piece, and then you'll have a gap, okay? So if you're sewing clothing or bags or something like that, back stitching is good. If you are quilting, do not back stitch. Back stitching is not required for quilting because it leaves a little bulk in the seams, and when you try to iron everything down, it can cause issues. So that's another tip for seams. If anybody has any questions about seams or anything, y'all let me know down in the comments, or you can send me an email. My email is always listed below. I had someone comment the other day about making a quilt sandwich and how to do it on a regular machine. So I'm going to make that my next video. And y'all remember to have a life lived creatively, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.